The biker boss was climbing off his Harley when something small brushed against his leather vest. Not a weapon, not a threat. A crumpled $5 bill. He looked down through the rain-soaked neon glow. A little girl stood directly in front of him. Dark hair plastered to her face, sneakers soaked through, both hands trembling as she held the money up like it was her last bargaining chip. "Please," she said, barely audible over the rain. "This is all I have." His crew closed in immediately. Protective. Territorial. But Benny Stewart raised one tattooed hand, stopping them cold. Nobody approached him like this. People crossed streets when they saw his patch. He crouched down, eye level with her, rain dripping from his beard. "What do you want, kid?" She swallowed hard, words catching in her throat. "I want you to save my mother," she said. "Because no one else can." That made him pause. She leaned closer, voice breaking. "They said if I tell anyone, she dies tonight." That's when he noticed the dirt under her fingernails, the tear in her jacket, and the way she kept checking the shadows behind her like something was already hunting. Benny Stewart slowly took the $5, not because he needed it, but because whatever she was about to say would cost far more than money. If you want to see how this 7-year-old changed the fate of the city's most feared man, you need to stay until the very end, because what she reveals next will shake you. Welcome back to the channel where we uncover stories that prove courage comes in the smallest packages. Stay with me until the end, because what this little girl named next froze a man who thought he'd buried his past. Before we begin, don't forget to like this video, hit subscribe, and comment where you're watching from. Now, let's get started. Benny Stewart had been running the city's underground for 12 years. He'd built his reputation on two things: keeping his word and making problems disappear permanently. His territory stretched from the industrial waterfront to the downtown core, and everyone who mattered knew the rules. You paid your debts on time, you kept your mouth shut, and you never, ever brought children into the game. That Thursday night started like any other. Benny was leaving the Iron Den, his crew's headquarters and front business, after settling accounts with local operators, protection arrangements, loan collections, the usual transactions that kept his operation running smooth. His custom: Harley waited at the curb, engine still warm, while Jax and Reaper flanked the entrance like guard dogs. The neighborhood understood this routine. When Benny emerged at 9 o'clock sharp, people found somewhere else to be. Bar owners locked their doors early. Mothers called their kids inside. And anyone with sense crossed to the other side of the street before he even glanced their way. But this little girl didn't cross the street. She didn't run. She walked straight toward him through the rain with that crumpled bill clutched in her small fist. Benny had seen desperate people before, grown men who owed money they'd never repay, business owners behind on their payments, gamblers who'd bet everything on the wrong hand. Desperation had a smell, a sound, a way of making people do incredibly stupid things. This was different. This child wasn't desperate the way adults get desperate. She was focused, deliberate, like she'd practiced this moment in her head 1,000 times. Her clothes were worn but clean, patched carefully where they'd torn. Her sneakers had holes near the toes, but her eyes held something Benny hadn't seen in his world for a very long time. Raw, unshakable courage. "What's your name?" he asked, still crouched at her level. His crew shifted behind him, hands instinctively moving toward concealed weapons. They'd never seen their boss spend this much time with anyone, especially not a kid. "Light," she said softly. "Erica Light. But everyone calls me Light." "Light." Benny repeated it slowly, letting it settle. "How old are you, Light?" 7. Her voice got quieter with each answer, but she held her ground. "Almost 8. Benny glanced at Jax, who gave the slightest shrug. In their world, children meant complications. Children meant witnesses, questions, Investigations that nobody wanted. Smart operators avoided kids completely. "Where's your mother, Light?" Benny asked carefully. That's when the tears came. Not the hysterical crying you'd expect from a terrified child, but silent tears that streamed down her cheeks while she forced herself to keep speaking. "They took her," she said. "2 nights ago." Benny felt ice settle in his chest. "Who took her?" Light looked over her shoulder, scanning the wet street like she expected shadows to come alive. "The bad men with the bikes. They said she saw something she shouldn't have. They said she had to disappear." She held up the $5 bill again, and Benny could see it had been folded and unfolded so many times the paper was soft as fabric. Probably every dollar she owned. "These men," Benny said slowly. "What did they look like?" Light wiped her face with her sleeve. "Tall, mean. One had a scar across his whole face. Another one had a patch that looked like a wolf with red eyes. They rode loud bikes with flames painted on them." Benny's jaw clenched. He knew exactly who she was describing. The names hit him like a physical blow, names that shouldn't exist anymore. Men he'd personally banished from his territory years ago for crossing lines even he wouldn't cross. "Light, where's your father?" Benny asked quietly. "Gone. Left when I was little." She said it without emotion, like she'd explained it too many times to feel anything anymore. "It's just me and Mom now. It was just me and Mom." Reaper stepped forward. "Boss, we need to move. People are watching." Benny silenced him with a look. In 12 years of running crews, settling scores, and controlling territory, he'd developed rules that kept him breathing and out of prison. Rule number 1, never let emotions drive decisions. Rule number 2, never trust anyone outside the club. Rule number 3, never under any circumstances get involved with kids. But looking at Light standing there in the rain, clutching her $5 like it could buy miracles, Benny felt something crack inside his chest. Maybe it was remembering the kid he used to be before the world taught him cruelty. Maybe it was thinking about all the times he'd wished someone with power would give a damn when everything fell apart. "Light, what exactly do you want me to do?" he asked. She took a shaky breath, and for a moment Benny thought she might collapse right there on the wet pavement. Instead, Light straightened her small shoulders like she was carrying weight no 7-year-old should ever hold. "I want you to bring my mom home," she said, "before they make her disappear forever." Benny stood slowly, rain running down his face. He looked at his crew, then back at the child. "Jax, Reaper, give us a minute. Check the perimeter." Both men hesitated. Leaving their boss alone with a witness went against every protocol they had, but Benny's tone left no room for argument. They moved away, far enough to give privacy but close enough to respond if things went wrong. Benny knelt again, lowering his voice. "Light, I need you to tell me exactly what happened. Not what you think I want to hear. The truth." Light nodded, wiping rain from her eyes. "Mom didn't owe anyone money. She works at the diner on 5th Street. Double shifts. We don't have extra money for anything." "Then why did they take her?" "She saw something." Light's voice dropped to barely a whisper. 2 nights ago, she was walking home late. She took the shortcut through the alley behind the old factory. There were trucks there, men loading boxes. She said she heard screaming from inside one of the containers. Benny's blood went cold. "She ran," Light continued, "but one of them saw her, chased her 3 blocks before she got away. She came home scared, really scared. She made me promise not to open the door for anyone." "What happened next?" "They came the next night, broke the lock. I hid like she told me to." Tears streamed down Light's face now. "I heard everything. They said she was a problem. They said problems don't stay problems for long." "Then they took her." Benny's mind was already working, pieces falling into place like a puzzle he'd tried to forget. The description Light gave. The wolf patch with red eyes, the scar, the flame-painted bikes. He knew those details. Knew them because he'd burned them into his memory the day he'd made his choice. 5 years ago. The memory hit him like a fist. The warehouse meeting, the circle of his most trusted men. And across from them, 3 riders who'd pushed too far. Trafficking, civilians, kids. Benny had drawn a line that night. The kind of line that didn't get crossed in his territory. He'd given them one chance. Leave the city and never come back. Ride out or get buried. He'd watched them leave. Watched their taillights disappear into the night. He hadn't made sure they stayed gone. Light, Benny said carefully.
Did your mother say anything about the patches they wore? The symbols? Light nodded quickly. She drew them for me. She said if anything happened to her, I should show someone who'd understand. She reached into her jacket pocket with trembling fingers and pulled out a folded piece of paper, protected inside a plastic sandwich bag. Benny unfolded it. His stomach dropped. There, in careful pencil sketches, were the 3 patches he'd banned from his territory. The red wolf, the burning crown, the broken chain, marks that weren't supposed to exist anymore. Marks that represented men who'd violated every code, every rule, every line that separated criminals from monsters. Vince Scar Morrison, Kyle Redbone Foster, and their leader, Tommy Reaper Jack Donnelly. The ghosts he'd thought he'd banished were operating inside his borders, using his reputation as cover, preying on civilians under the protection his name was supposed to provide. If this revelation just sent chills down your spine, smash that like button, because Benny's about to make a decision that will change everything. Drop a comment telling me if you think he can find her mother in time. Benny felt rage rise in his chest, cold and sharp. This wasn't just about saving one woman anymore. This was about his authority being gutted from the inside, about his territory becoming a hunting ground while he'd been too comfortable, too confident that fear alone would keep order. If these men were back, if they were running operations in his city, then everything he'd built over 12 years was already crumbling. Every deal, every arrangement, every understanding that kept the peace, all of it rested on one foundation, that Benny Stewart's word was law. And right now, his word meant nothing. Light, he said quietly, folding the paper carefully. I'm going to ask you something important. Where have you been staying since they took your mother? Stairwells mostly. The library during the day. I knew they'd come back looking for me. Benny stood, his decision made. He turned toward his crew. Jax, get over here. As his lieutenant approached, Benny looked down at Light one more time. Kid, I'm going to keep that $5, and I'm going to earn every cent of it. Because if he didn't, everything he'd built would burn, and he'd deserve to burn with it. Jax reached them, water dripping from his cut. His eyes moved from Benny to the little girl. Questions written across his face. Benny handed him the sketches without a word. Jax's expression darkened as he studied the drawings. Boss, these marks, I know what they are. Benny's voice was flat, controlled. Get on the radio. I want every set of eyes we have on the street. Anyone who's seen these patches operating in our territory, I want locations. Now. Jax nodded and moved away, already pulling out his phone. Benny turned back to Light, who stood watching him with those impossibly brave eyes. He crouched down again, this time with a different question. Light, I need to know. Where exactly have you been sleeping these past 2 nights? She looked down at her soaked sneakers. Different places. The first night I stayed in the stairwell at the metro station on 7th. It's warm there because of the vents. Last night I slept behind the dumpsters near the coffee shop on Oak Street. Benny felt something twist in his chest. By yourself? I couldn't go home. They came back looking for me. Light's voice was steady, matter of fact, like she was reporting facts instead of describing her own nightmare. I watched from across the street. They broke our window. I heard them say if they found me, they could use me to make Mom cooperate. What did you eat? Vending machines, mostly. I had some quarters, crackers, chips. The library has a water fountain. Reaper had circled back and was now standing close enough to hear. Benny saw his lieutenant's jaw clench. Even in their world, this crossed lines. A 7-year-old surviving alone on the streets while predators hunted her. How did you know to come to me? Benny asked quietly. For the first time, Light's voice wavered. I watched you. For a whole day before I came, I saw how people move when you're around. How they cross the street. How they don't look at you directly. She paused. I needed someone the bad men would be afraid of. Someone scarier than them. That's a dangerous way to think, kid. I know. Light met his eyes directly. But being scared and alone is more dangerous. At least this way I had a chance. Benny felt something he hadn't felt in years. Genuine respect for someone else's courage. This child had done what most adults couldn't. She'd assessed her options, made a calculated risk, and approached the most dangerous man she could find because the alternative was worse. She reminded him of someone. A kid from a long time ago who'd learned the hard way that sometimes the only people who help you are the ones everyone else fears. A kid who'd survived by being smart instead of strong. He'd been that kid once, before the world hardened him into what he'd become. Light, he said carefully. Most kids would be crying right now, begging to go home. Why aren't you falling apart? She looked down again, and when she spoke, her voice was smaller. I am falling apart. I'm just doing it on the inside. She wiped her face with her sleeve. Mom taught me to be brave when things get scary. She said crying doesn't fix problems. It just makes you tired. Your mom sounds smart. She is. Light's voice cracked on those two words. She's really smart and really kind, and she doesn't deserve what's happening to her. She's probably so scared right now. She hates the dark, and they probably have her somewhere dark, and... Her words tumbled out faster, control finally slipping. Not for herself. For her mother. Benny stood slowly and looked at the crumpled $5 bill still clutched in Light's shaking hand. He'd taken payment from criminals, corrupt officials, people who deserved exactly what they got. But this was different. He reached out and gently closed his hand over hers, the money between their palms. Light, I'm taking this job, but not because you're paying me. He met her eyes. I'm doing this because those men broke rules that can't be broken. They're operating in my territory. They took someone under my watch, and they're hunting a kid who had the guts to ask me for help. Light's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back. You promise you'll find her? Benny Stewart had learned long ago not to make promises he couldn't keep. Promises in his world were currency. You only spent them when you were absolutely certain you could deliver. But looking at this 7-year-old who'd survived 2 nights alone, who'd outsmarted predators and approached a biker boss with nothing but courage and $5, Benny found himself saying words he rarely spoke. I give you my word. Your mom comes home. He stood, still holding the $5, and realized with absolute clarity that he'd already crossed a line he couldn't uncross. This wasn't business anymore. This was personal. And personal was the most dangerous thing a man like him could get. Light nodded, a small gesture that carried the weight of absolute trust. She believed him. Maybe because she had no other choice, or maybe because she saw something in Benny that he'd forgotten was still there. Light, I need you to understand something. Benny kept his voice level, honest. Getting your mom back means finding very dangerous men. Men who won't want to be found. When we find them, things are going to get violent. People are going to get hurt.
Do you understand what I'm telling you? Light looked up at him, rain still falling between them. Will my mom come home? The question cut through everything else. No concern for herself, no questions about the cost or the consequences, just the one thing that mattered. Yes, Benny said. She'll come home. Then I understand. Benny felt something shift in his chest, a realignment of priorities he'd kept carefully separated for years. He looked at Reaper, then back at Light. These men who took your mother, they're also looking for you. That means you're in danger right now, standing here talking to me. He paused, making sure she heard every word. If they're hunting you, then they're hunting me now, and nobody hunts me in my city. Light's eyes widened slightly, not with fear, but with something else. Hope, maybe. Or relief that she wasn't alone anymore. Benny turned to Reaper. Take her to the safe house on Morrison Street, the one with the reinforced doors. Get Cassie to look after her. Food, clean clothes, whatever she needs. Nobody gets near that building without going through you first. On it, boss. Reaper moved closer to Light, his voice surprisingly gentle. Come on, kid. Let's get you somewhere warm. Light looked back at Benny. What about my mom? How will you find her? I've got people who know things. We'll find her. Benny knelt one last time. Light, while you're safe, I need you to do something for me. Write down everything you remember. Every detail about the men, the trucks, what your mom said, everything. Can you do that? Yes. Good. And Light. He paused, choosing his words carefully. When this is over, you're going to hear stories about what happened. Bad stories. Don't let them change what you know. Your mom is coming home because you were brave enough to ask for help. Remember that. She nodded solemnly, then turned and walked away with Reaper, disappearing into the rain and neon glow. Benny stood alone on the wet street, the $5 bill still in his hand. Jax approached, phone pressed to his ear, ending a call. Word's out. Everyone's checking in. We've got reports coming from all sectors. Good. Benny pocketed the money. Call a meeting, full membership, but keep it quiet. No engines revving, no patches visible, cars only. I want everyone at the warehouse in 30 minutes. Jax's eyebrows rose. Full blackout protocol? These guys think they're operating in shadows. Let's show them what real shadows look like. Benny started walking toward his bike, then stopped. And Jax? Get Tommy on the line. Tell him to pull every file we have on Scar Morrison, Redbone Foster, and Reaper Jack Donnelly. Old addresses, known associates, anyone who'd shelter them. I want a complete picture before we move. Boss, those names, you sure we're going after them directly? Benny turned, and something in his expression made Jax take a step back. 5 years ago, I made a mistake. I let mercy look like weakness. I gave them a choice to walk away, and they used that mercy to come back stronger. His voice dropped. Tonight, we correct that mistake. Permanently. Subscribe right now if you want to see how Benny hunts down these ghosts from his past, because what happens in the next 20 minutes will be unforgettable. Within 20 minutes, the streets around the Iron Den began to change. Not obviously. No roaring engines or leather-clad riders making a show of force. Instead, quiet vehicles appeared one by one. Sedans, trucks, unmarked vans. They parked in alleys and side streets, invisible to anyone not looking for them. Inside each vehicle, men checked weapons with practiced efficiency. These weren't street thugs or weekend warriors. These were Benny's core crew. Riders who'd been with him through territory wars, police raids and internal challenges, men who understood that power wasn't about making noise. It was about making the right people disappear. Benny stood in the warehouse watching his club assemble in the dim light. 43 men, all waiting for his word. No patches tonight, no colors, just dark clothing and grim determination. The room fell silent as he stepped forward. 5 years ago, we made a choice about what kind of club we'd be, Benny began, his voice carrying through the space. We drew lines, no trafficking, no civilians, no kids. 3 men violated those rules, and I gave them mercy. He pulled out the sketches Light had given him and held them up. They're back, operating in our territory, using our reputation as cover. They took a civilian woman who witnessed their operation. And they're hunting her 7-year-old daughter. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Men shifted, hands clenching, jaws tightening. Tonight, we fix what I should have finished 5 years ago. Benny's voice was ice. We find these men. We recover the woman. And we make sure this never happens again. He looked around the room, meeting eyes one by one. No mercy this time. No second chances. We end this. The warehouse erupted in silent agreement. No cheers, no shouts. Just the quiet sound of weapons being loaded and final preparations being made. The city didn't know it yet, but somewhere in its shadows, 3 men had just run out of time, and Benny Stewart was coming to collect. The operation moved like a well-oiled machine, each piece falling into place with precision that came from years of coordinated work. Benny watched from the warehouse command center as his territory transformed into a trap with invisible teeth. Tommy Tech Martinez sat at a folding table covered in laptops and burner phones, coordinating movements across a dozen screens. Safe house network is locked down, boss. Anyone connected to the Red Wolf crew, their usual crash spots are being watched. Silent surveillance only. Good. What about communications? Working on it. Tommy's fingers flew across a keyboard. We've got ears on 3 frequencies they used to operate on. If they're still using the old channels, we'll hear everything. Benny nodded and turned to Jax, who'd just walked in from the street, rain dripping from his jacket. What'd you find? Talk to Mickey at the port. He says there's been unusual truck activity near the old industrial zone, the abandoned sector near the river. Cargo containers being moved at night, always the same 3 trucks. No legitimate paperwork, no manifests. Benny's jaw tightened. The industrial zone is still our territory. They're not even trying to hide. They think we don't patrol that far out anymore, Jax said. It's been dead for years. No business, no reason to watch it. Until now. Benny pulled up a map on his phone, studying the industrial sector. Miles of abandoned warehouses, shipping containers, and empty lots. Perfect place to hide an operation. Who else have we got on the street? Razor's checking with his contacts in the trucking unions. Snake's hitting up the dock workers. If these guys are moving cargo, someone's seen something. 20 minutes later, Razor called in. His voice crackled through the speaker. Boss, got something. Union rep says a guy named Cutter's been hiring independent drivers for off-book runs. Cash only, no questions. Fits the profile. Where's Cutter now? His usual spot, Rusty Anchor Bar on the east side. Bring him in. Quiet. It took another 15 minutes before Razor's van pulled up outside the warehouse. 2 men dragged Cutter inside, a wiry guy in his 40s with nervous eyes and a cigarette habit. He looked around at the assembled bikers and went pale. Benny walked up slowly, letting the silence build. Cutter, you know who I am? Yeah, Benny Stewart. Look, man, whatever this is about, you've been running trucks for someone. Off-book deliveries to the industrial zone. I want names. Cutter's eyes darted toward the exit. I don't know what you're talking about. Benny didn't raise his voice. Didn't need to. Cutter, you've got about 10 seconds to decide if your loyalty to whoever's paying you is worth more than your ability to walk out of here. The man's resolve crumbled. Okay. Guy named Morrison hired me. Scar-faced dude. Said he needed containers moved, no questions. Paid triple rate. Where? Old Barton Steel facility. The one that's been shut down for 5 years. They're using the back lot. Lots of containers stacked up. Perfect cover. Benny felt electricity run through him. How many men? I don't know, man. I just dropped the loads and left. Maybe 10, 12. They had guns, serious hardware. What were you moving? Cutter hesitated. Benny stepped closer. Containers. Cargo containers. I didn't look inside. Didn't want to know. But you suspected. Cutter's silence was answer enough. Benny turned to Jax. Get him out of here. If he talks to anyone, we'll know. After Cutter was gone, Tommy pulled up satellite images of the Barton Steel facility on his screen. Boss, look at this. Thermal imaging from earlier tonight shows heat signatures in 3 separate containers. Could be generators, could be... people, Benny finished. His blood went cold. Light's mother wasn't the first, maybe not even the last. These men weren't just covering up one witness, they were running a full operation. Snake burst through the door, breathing hard. Boss, just got word from the docks. One of the night guards saw Morrison and Foster loading a woman into a container 2 nights ago. Fits the description. Brown hair, about 35, and she was alive but drugged. 2 nights ago, Benny repeated. That matched Light's timeline exactly. Is she still there? Guard says they haven't moved that container since. It's still in the yard. Hit that subscribe button if your heart is racing right now, because Benny's rescue mission is about to begin and you won't believe what happens next. The pieces fell together with brutal clarity. Light's mother was a loose end they were keeping alive, probably for leverage, probably as bait in case Light went to the police. They'd grabbed her fast, but they hadn't disposed of her yet. That meant there was still time. Not much time, but enough. Benny turned to face his assembled crew. Listen up. We've got a location. Barton Steel facility. Multiple hostages confirmed. At least 12 hostiles, probably armed. This isn't a raid. This is a rescue operation with extreme prejudice. He pulled up the facility map on the big screen. Tommy, I want drone surveillance within the hour. I need to know exact positions, guard rotations, weak points. Jax, coordinate 3 teams. Entry, extraction, and containment. Nobody gets in or out once we move. What about police response? Someone asked. That sector's a dead zone. No patrols, no cameras, no witnesses. By the time anyone knows something happened, it'll be over. Benny's voice was steel. We go in at midnight. That gives us 3 hours to prepare. We get the hostages out first. Then we handle Morrison and his crew. He looked around the room, making sure everyone understood. These men violated every code we have. They're using our territory to prey on civilians. And they made the mistake of hunting a child who came to us for help. He paused. Tonight, we remind this city why people fear our name. Not because we're monsters, because we're the ones who stopped them. Tommy's phone buzzed. He checked it, then looked up, face grim. Boss, we just intercepted a transmission. Morrison's crew is planning to move the containers tomorrow morning, early, 5 a.m. The timeline just collapsed. Benny checked his watch, 11:47 p.m. They had 13 minutes to mobilize and 6 miles to cover. Change of plans, Benny said, his voice cutting through the sudden tension. We move now. Everyone in position in 10 minutes. The warehouse exploded into controlled chaos. Weapons distributed, teams formed, vehicles started. Somewhere in the darkness, 3 men were about to learn what happened when you made an enemy of Benny Stewart. And Light's mother was about to find out that her daughter's desperate gamble had just paid off. The convoy moved through the city like ghosts. Headlights off, engines barely audible, 3 vehicles spaced apart to avoid drawing attention. Benny rode in the lead car with Jax, watching the industrial zone emerge from the darkness ahead. The Barton Steel facility loomed against the night sky, a skeleton of rusted metal and broken windows. Behind it, rows of shipping containers formed a makeshift maze, perfect for hiding things that weren't meant to be found. Kill the engine here, Benny ordered. They coasted to a stop 2 blocks out. The other vehicles followed suit, men emerging silently into the night. Tommy's voice crackled through the earpiece. Drones in position. I count 4 guards on patrol, 2 walking the perimeter, 2 stationary near the container cluster. Heat signatures confirm at least 8 more inside the main building. Weapons? Armed. I'm seeing rifles, sidearms. They're alert but not expecting company. Benny signaled his teams. Razor and Snake moved left, circling toward the north entrance. Jax took 3 men right, covering the southern approach. Benny led the center team straight toward the container yard. The first guard went down without a sound. Razor's work, quick and efficient. The second guard reached for his radio but never made it. Snake caught him mid-step, and the man crumpled silently. "Perimeter clear," came the whisper through the comm. Benny advanced through the container maze, his team moving like shadows between the metal boxes. The smell hit him first. Rust, mildew, and something worse underneath. Fear, desperation, human suffering packed into steel boxes. They reached the first container. A padlock hung from the door. Benny nodded to Jax, who produced bolt cutters. The lock snapped with a soft click. Inside, 3 women huddled against the far wall, blinking against the sudden flashlight. They looked half-starved, terrified, clothes torn and filthy. One started to scream, but Benny raised his hand. "We're getting you out," he said quietly. "Stay calm. Help is here." 2 more containers yielded similar horrors. 6 women total, all in various states of trauma. Benny's jaw clenched tighter with each discovery. This wasn't just about Light's mother anymore. Morrison and his crew had been operating for months, maybe longer. "Boss," Razor's voice came through. "Container 7, you need to see this." Benny moved quickly through the maze. The container door stood partially open, dim light spilling out. Inside, a single woman lay on a dirty mattress, wrists zip-tied, a gag around her mouth. But her eyes were open, alert. She had Light's eyes. "Erica Martinez?" Benny asked softly. The woman nodded frantically, tears streaming down her face. Benny cut her restraints carefully. "Your daughter sent me. Light's safe. She's with my people." He helped her sit up. "Can you walk?" Erica tried to stand, but her legs buckled. Days without proper food or water had left her weak. Benny caught her, steadying her weight. "We're going to get you out of here," he said. "But first I need to know, how many men are here?" 12, Erica whispered, her voice hoarse. "Morrison's in the main building. They're planning to move us tomorrow morning, ship us overseas." Her eyes met his. "Thank you. Thank you for coming. Light, is she really safe?" "She's safe, and she's waiting for you." Gunfire suddenly erupted from the main building. The element of surprise was gone. "All teams converge!" Benny ordered into his comm. "Get the hostages to the extraction vehicles, now!" The night exploded into controlled chaos as Benny's war finally began. Benny handed Erica off to Razor. "Get her and the others out. 3 blocks west, medical teams waiting." "What about you, boss?" "I've got unfinished business." The gunfire intensified as Benny's teams closed in on the main building. He could see muzzle flashes in the broken windows, hear shouting from inside. Morrison's crew was trapped and knew it. Jax appeared at his side, breathing hard. "They've barricaded the main entrance, 6 men inside, refusing to come out." "Then we go in." Benny checked his weapon. "Suppressing fire on my mark. We breach from the east side, that loading dock door's rotted through." The assault was surgical. Flash grenades shattered the remaining windows, disorienting the men inside. Benny's team poured through the loading dock like a flood, overwhelming resistance before it could organize. 3 of Morrison's men went down in the first 30 seconds. The others dropped their weapons, hands raised. But Morrison, Foster, and Donnelly weren't among them. "Boss!" Tommy's voice crackled through the comm. "Thermal shows 3 signatures moving toward the back office. They're trying to slip out the rear exit."
Lock it down. Nobody leaves. Benny moved through the darkened warehouse, past abandoned machinery and pools of stagnant water. The back office door stood ajar, light spilling into the corridor. He could hear voices inside, urgent, angry, desperate. He kicked the door open. 3 men spun around. Vince Scar Morrison, his namesake running from temple to jaw. Kyle Redbone Foster, tattoos covering his neck and arms. And Tommy Reaper Jack Donnelly, the leader, older now but still carrying that same cold arrogance. All 3 reached for weapons. All 3 froze when they saw who stood in the doorway. Benny Stewart. Donnelly's voice was careful, controlled. Didn't expect to see you personally. That was your first mistake. Benny stepped inside, Jax and 2 others flanking him. Thinking you could operate in my territory without me noticing. Morrison laughed, though it sounded forced. Your territory?
Man, you've gone soft. You don't even patrol half these streets anymore. We saw an opportunity.
You saw a chance to prey on civilians while hiding behind my reputation. Benny's voice was ice. You knew no other crews would touch this sector because it's mine. You used that protection to build your operation. Business is business, Foster said, trying to sound reasonable. We kept it quiet, stayed out of your way. This doesn't have to be a problem. It became a problem when you took that woman, when you started hunting her 7-year-old daughter. The room went silent. Donnelly's eyes narrowed. The kid came to you? Walked right up to me on the street, offered me $5 to save her mother. Benny pulled out the crumpled bill, let them see it. $5. Everything she had in the world. Donnelly spread his hands, attempting diplomacy. Look, we can work this out. The woman saw something she shouldn't have. We were cleaning up loose ends, protecting the operation. You understand that. You've done the same thing. I've never taken a mother from her child. Details, Morrison spat. We'll cut you in. 30% of everything. The operation's profitable. Trafficking pays better than drugs. Less heat from the feds. You're not hearing me. Benny's voice dropped lower. This isn't a negotiation. Donnelly's face hardened. 5 years ago, you had your chance to end us. You let us walk. That was your choice. My mistake, Benny said quietly. One I'm correcting tonight. Foster shifted nervously. Benny, come on. We go back. You don't want to do this. I should have done this 5 years ago. Benny met each of their eyes in turn. I thought exile was enough. Thought mercy would make us better than the animals we fought. But you 3 taught me something important tonight. What's that? Some men don't deserve mercy. They just deserve consequences. Morrison went for his gun. He was fast, but Jax was faster. The shot echoed in the small office, and Morrison crumpled. Foster backed against the wall, hands up. Wait, we can still... He never finished. The second shot was quieter, more final. Donnelly stood alone now, all pretense of negotiation gone. You're making a mistake. We've got connections, people who'll come looking for us. No one's coming, Benny said, because after tonight it'll be like you never existed, just like it should have been 5 years ago. Donnelly's hand moved toward his jacket. Benny's weapon rose. Any last words? Donnelly's face twisted with rage. You're no different than us. You're just better at lying to yourself about what you are. Maybe, Benny said, but I keep my promises. I told a little girl her mother would come home. The third shot ended the conversation. If you're feeling the weight of this moment, leave a comment sharing your thoughts. Because what happens next will restore your faith in second chances. Benny stood in the silence that followed, looking at the 3 bodies. 5 years of unfinished business, concluded in less than 5 minutes. Jax cleared his throat. Boss, crews reporting all hostiles neutralized. The hostages are secure, medical's treating them. We're clean.
Good. Burn it all. Every container, every document, every trace they were here. By sunrise, this place is nothing but ash. As they walked out, Benny tucked the $5 bill back into his pocket. Some debts could only be paid in blood. Tonight, he'd finally settled his. The safe house on Morrison Street had a single light burning in the upstairs window. Benny pulled up outside at 2:47 a.m., the city still asleep, unaware of what had transpired in the industrial zone. Erica Martinez sat in the passenger seat, wrapped in a blanket, silent tears streaming down her face. "She's upstairs," Benny said quietly. "Second door on the left." Erica's hand trembled on the door handle. "I don't know what to say to you. How to thank you for—" "You don't need to say anything." Benny kept his eyes forward. "Just hold your daughter." Erica nodded and stepped out into the pre-dawn darkness. Benny watched her walk toward the door, then followed at a distance. Reaper met them at the entrance, nodding to Benny before leading Erica inside. The house was quiet, except for the sound of someone moving upstairs. Benny stayed in the doorway as Erica climbed the stairs, each step deliberate, like she was afraid this moment might shatter if she moved too fast. The bedroom door opened. Light had been sitting on the bed, wearing borrowed clothes that were too big for her, clutching a pillow. When she saw her mother standing in the doorway, she froze, like her mind couldn't process that the impossible had actually happened. "Mom?" The word was barely a whisper. Erica's face crumbled. "Baby. Oh God, baby." Light moved. She launched herself across the room, and Erica caught her, both of them collapsing to their knees in the doorway. Light's small arms wrapped around her mother's neck, squeezing with desperate strength, and Erica held her daughter like she'd never let go again. No words, just the sound of them breathing, crying, holding each other while the world outside continued spinning. Benny watched from the bottom of the stairs, something tight constricting in his chest. He'd witnessed violence, betrayal, death, emotions that belonged to his world. But this raw moment of reunion, of hope validated and promises kept, was something else entirely. Cassie, the woman who'd been watching Light, appeared beside him. "That's what we fight for," she said softly. "Not territory, not respect. That right there." Benny nodded, unable to speak. After several minutes, Light pulled back slightly, her hands still clutching her mother's shirt. Her eyes found Benny standing in the shadows below. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the crumpled $5 bill he'd returned to her earlier. She looked at it, then at him, understanding something profound for a 7-year-old. She let it fall. The bill drifted down the stairs, landing at Benny's feet. "Thank you," Light said, her voice steady despite the tears. "You kept your promise." Benny picked up the $5 and walked up the stairs slowly. He knelt down, bringing himself to Light's level one final time, and carefully placed the bill in her small hand. "You keep this," he said quietly. "Not as payment, as proof that you were brave enough to ask for help when nobody else would, and that sometimes the world gives you back what you hope for." Light looked at the money, then threw her arms around Benny's neck. He stiffened, uncomfortable with the gesture, but then his hand came up slowly, gently patting her back. "You saved us," Light whispered in his ear. "No, kid. You saved yourself." Benny pulled back, meeting her eyes. "You just gave me the chance to help." He stood and turned to Erica. "There's a car outside that'll take you anywhere you want to go. New city, new start. We'll arrange everything. Papers, money, protection. You'll be safe." "What about those men?" Erica asked, though something in her eyes said she already knew the answer. "They won't be looking for you anymore, or anyone else." Erica understood. She nodded slowly. "Thank you, Mr. Stewart, for everything."
Benny walked down the stairs, Cassie following. At the door, he paused and looked back one more time. Mother and daughter sat together on the top step, holding each other in the dim light. He stepped out into the darkness and found Jax waiting by the car. "Everything handled?" Jax asked. "Yeah, everything's handled." As they drove away, Benny looked at his reflection in the window. Somewhere in the past 12 hours, something had shifted. He'd crossed lines, broken his own rules, let emotion drive decisions, and he'd do it again in a heartbeat. Because sometimes being the most feared man in the city meant being the one person who could help when no one else would. The cleanup took 3 days. By sunrise, the Barton Steel facility was nothing but ash and twisted metal. The containers that had held human cargo were reduced to slag. Every document, every piece of evidence that Morrison's crew had existed, gone. Erased as thoroughly as if they'd never been there at all. Benny's people worked efficiently, asking no questions, leaving no traces. This was what they did. What they'd always done. Make problems disappear. But this time felt different. The 7 women rescued that night were given new identities, relocation assistance, and enough money to start over. Medical care, counseling, protection, everything they needed to reclaim the lives that had been stolen from them. Benny never asked for gratitude. He simply ensured they had what they required to heal. Erica and Light Martinez vanished on the 3rd day. A car picked them up before dawn, taking them to a small town 3 states away where nobody knew their names or their story. A modest house waited for them, paid for in full. A job had been arranged for Erica at a local clinic. Light would start at a new school in the fall. They would be safe. They would be free, and they would be watched, quietly, distantly, to ensure that safety lasted. Benny received one message before they left, a text from an unknown number that simply read, "Thank you. We'll never forget." He deleted it immediately. Some debts were better left unspoken. Life returned to its rhythm. Territory disputes were settled. Collections were made. The city moved on, unaware that 7 women had been saved and 3 predators had been permanently removed from existence. But Benny Stewart moved differently now. He found himself noticing things he'd ignored before. Mothers walking their kids to school, families laughing in restaurants, the small moments of ordinary life happening around him. Things he'd trained himself not to see because caring about them made his world more complicated. Now, he couldn't unsee them. The $5 bill stayed in his desk drawer at the Iron Den, folded carefully inside an envelope. He'd take it out sometimes, look at it, remember the little girl who'd been brave enough to approach a monster and ask him to be something better. If this story moved you, hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear it, because courage comes in all sizes. 4 months later, on a Tuesday afternoon, a package arrived at the Iron Den. No return address, no note. Just a manila envelope marked, "For Benny Stewart." Inside was a single piece of paper, a child's drawing in crayon. 2 stick figures holding hands under a rainbow. One tall with a beard and what might have been a motorcycle jacket. One small with long hair. Both were smiling. Above them, in careful 7-year-old handwriting, "Thank you for being brave, too. Love, Light." And at the bottom, taped carefully to the page, a $5 bill. Benny stared at the drawing for a long time. He thought about framing it, putting it somewhere private. But instead, he pinned it to the wall behind his desk, right next to the map of his territory, beside the photographs of his crew, in the space where everyone who entered could see it. Jax noticed it first. "Boss, what's that?" "A reminder," Benny said simply. "Of what?" Benny looked at the drawing, the simple crayon lines, the hopeful colors, the evidence that one child's courage had forced a reckoning he'd been avoiding for 5 years.
of what power is actually for. Jax nodded slowly, understanding without needing more explanation. He'd been there that night. He'd seen his boss kneel in the rain and make a promise to a terrified child. He'd watched Benny violate every rule he'd built his empire on because sometimes rules had to break for the right reasons. That evening, Benny stood outside the Iron Den, watching the city settle into night. People walked past. Some crossed the street out of habit, others nodded respectfully. A few ignored him entirely. The neighborhood knew his name, knew his reputation, knew that when Benny Stewart walked these streets, order followed. But now they also knew, though they'd never speak it aloud, that the most dangerous man in the city had once knelt in the rain for a little girl with $5 and hope. And when the predators came, when the monsters thought they could operate in the shadows, Benny Stewart had reminded everyone what happened when you crossed lines that shouldn't be crossed. Some men built empires on fear. Some men built them on respect. Benny Stewart had learned, late but not too late, that the strongest foundation was something else entirely: accountability. Because power without purpose was just violence. But power wielded for the right reasons: to protect the defenseless, to punish the predators, to honor promises made to those who had nowhere else to turn. That was something worth the cost. Benny pulled out his phone and looked at the drawing one more time, saved now as his lock screen. A stick figure child holding hands with a stick figure biker under a crayon rainbow. He smiled. Just slightly. Just enough. Some debts couldn't be measured in money. Some promises couldn't be broken. And sometimes, the bravest person in the room was the one small enough to believe the world could still be good if someone just chose to make it so. Benny Stewart pocketed his phone and walked back inside. Tomorrow, there would be territory to manage, disputes to settle, order to maintain. But tonight, he'd remember what it felt like to be the man a 7-year-old thought he could be. And that, he decided, was enough. Before you go, make sure you're subscribed because we're bringing you more incredible true stories that prove humanity still exists in the darkest places. Drop a comment telling us what you learned from Light's courage. Hit that notification bell so you never miss another story. And if this touched your heart, share it with someone who needs hope today. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.